All right. Testing 1, 2. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Truth Warrior. We got a big one today. I'm going to try to stay as focused as I possibly can, not get off on too many tangents. I'm just going to present some information. This is specific to the situation going on in my country of Canada. And so I hope you guys can all hear me loud and clear. We should be live on X, on Rumble, and on Twitch. So let me just make sure that is all good to go before I start kicking in here. Okay, here we go. We got something going on over there. And Rumble. How are we doing over on Rumble? If you're in the chat, say hello. Tell me where you're listening from. It's always good to be here with you all. So I've been covering this whole Canada situation. Oh my God. In Canada, I've been at this since about 2008, if you can believe it. Okay. Since about 2008, I've been trying to put information out there for people to look at that they're not being shown by the mainstream media. They're not being told by their corrupt politicians. And this is the information about where Canada is really at and has been at for the past decade or more, at least, when it comes to our position, our sovereignty, our self-reliance, and whether or not we are actually living in a sovereign country. Are we living in the Canada that we all grew up with? I was born and raised in this country. I love this country. I love the people, I love the land. I don't want to move. I don't want to leave this country. But what is a country? This is the conversation we have to have right now. What is a country in 2025? What does that even mean anymore, given the current geopolitical, geoeconomic situation that the whole world is facing? We got some major indications during the pandemic that a lot of what we thought in Canada as being our checks and balances, our system of government, our charter of rights and freedoms, etc., we got a really rude awakening for those that were paying attention and didn't just buy into the propaganda automatically without questioning it. That there was a lot more going on in Canada than we maybe thought. And ever since then, a lot of more people have been waking up. More information is coming out, and even more mainstream journalists are starting to seriously cover and talk about the fact that this country has been penetrated and infiltrated in key positions of power and influence in our media, in our government, in our education system, in our intelligence services, etc. Donald Trump gets reelected and immediately starts trolling Justin Trudeau and calling him the governor, talking about this 51st state. Everybody thinks it's a joke. He doesn't stop talking about it. Canadians are like, what is this guy serious? What are you talking about? And that brings us to where we are. And I've been covering all of those details. I've done other live streams. I've shared my opinion. I've done some rants. I've done a lot of posting on my social media. And I'm seeing just how bad the fog of war is and how bad the propaganda has been and how misinformed the average Canadian is about what's really happening. So we want to talk about it, and I want to get into specific information today. So I'm not just going to go on big rants and big history lessons. We've already done that. I want to give something to people that aren't fully awake to the situation happening in our world. It's a sort of game. I've always looked at it as like a Game of Thrones situation. And very quickly, it's a good show to use as a metaphor here. Think about the script of that show in relation to what we're going to cover. Okay. Think about that show, Game of Thrones. You've got a situation in that show that they present right out of the gate where there is a existential common threat coming towards the gates of this kingdom called the White Walkers. Okay. They come in, they take over, they wipe everybody out. No discrimination. It's just old-fashioned takeover. And then the whole how many seasons did that show have? The whole show is about the internecine struggle going on between these different powerful royal families in this kingdom that are all fighting for this one throne, right? The Iron Throne or whatever. And that's the King of Kings. That's the top dog. They want the big prize, one ring to rule them all. Metaphorically, this show is actually talking about a lot of history, and it's very, very relevant to what's going on, because the dynamic in the show is very relevant to what we're doing in Canada right now, which is, in the show, all these powerful families and all these different factions are all fighting each other, and they're all having these battles for the throne, and people are dying, and there's just this whole thing going on. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking down as this common enemy force is coming in to take out everybody. And so that, to me, is the metaphor of the situation that we're in. Is we're all fighting the wrong battles. We're all tearing each other to bits and calling people traitors that we don't agree with, and just throwing shit around because we're having emotional reactions to what's happening, which is understandable. But the people that survive the times that we're in, the people that come out on top, are the ones that keep their heads, and they use logic, reason, and the process of procuring evidence to understand the situation. Everybody else runs around like a chicken with their head cut off, freaking out and just firing ammo in every possible direction because they're in fight or flight response. We're talking about a heavily traumatized population in Canada. We're talking about a heavily brainwashed population in Canada, because we have had our institutions of information captured by common interests that are not Canadian. And we're going to get into specifics. I'm not just speaking rhetoric here. We're going to get specific here today. Okay. So just want to set the stage that this is kind of the scenario that we're in. And we are in a clock is ticking down scenario that I can't even begin to describe to you the impacts that's going to have on every Canadian, no matter which way this goes. So we need to know why this is happening. And this is what I'm noticing. And I'm noticing this from the fact that, see, I'm the kind of person, I do this public work, I do this show. I realize a lot of the subjects I talk about are controversial because a lot of people don't do the back research and all that. But I don't go after people around me. I don't talk locally. I'm working in my business. I'm working in my life. I'm just trying to keep good relations, keep a good community together, right? And I don't try to go out there and purposely ruffle feathers and start all these big fights with everybody, because I know what it's like to talk to people who are in a state of like mass formation. Okay. So it's like impossible. You can't convince somebody that's in that emotional fight or flight response that's operating on bad information. So I try not to go direct, but here's the situation right now. I'm just going to fill you. If you're watching from America, I want to let you know that what's happening right now, every single Canadian that I bumped into in the last week, or walked past, or I'm at a sandwich shop and someone behind me is waiting to order and they're talking, right? Or you're at the coffee shop, or you're at the grocery store and the grocer and the clerk, they're all talking about it. Everybody's talking about how Canada is going to fight America and try to win this war. You got videos of these cowboys from Alberta talking like they're going to go out and ride off into the sunset on their horses and fight the Americans with their BB guns. It's getting out of hand. Okay. We got hockey games going around, this footage of all the hockey games. It seems to be the only thing Trudeau's talking about is like sports and concerts. So while Parliament is currently prorogued for what, 80 days or something now. Um, so everybody's talking. And then people start talking to me, and they don't know who they're talking to. And I don't try to get into it. And I'll maybe slip a few little things and go, hey, I try to keep it neutral. Because see, the thing is what I'm feeling is people are getting to that emotional state they were with the pandemic. And if they didn't see you with 2 masks on, holy smokes, they were ready to bring a torch bearing mob to your house. That's the vibe right now. You even whisper publicly anything that contradicts what the CBC News is telling people, what global news is telling people, what the Prime Minister of Canada, who has been caught in so many scandals and lies and disinformation, it's like I couldn't even do a whole podcast to roll it all out for you. People are switching their allegiance from one political ideology to suddenly going, well, Mark Carney is going to be the one that saves us. The globalist Davos banker who identifies as a European, who will only be doing a political campaign to simply win the leadership of the Liberal Party and will then be installed as the prime minister of this country, which is basically just the guy that's in charge of the treasury on behalf of the Crown Corporation that really runs this shit. So I said I wouldn't get off on too many tangents, but I do need to set the table here about where the vibe is at. And people are getting to a point where I'm concerned it's going to get physical. That's not the way it should be. I would hopefully expect a little more maturity, decorum, and intelligence, but you can't expect that because remember, this particular psychological operation being run on Canada to suddenly side with the actual traitors of this country, and we're going to get into it, it's very similar playbook as what the other campaigns that have been run over the past, say, 5 years. So Canada is as a population, I mean, there's a lot of great awake people. Like, look at what happened with the convoy and what's been going on, right? We do have that. But here's the problem. There's layers of waking up. And unfortunately, we're not at the level of seeing things from a bigger geopolitical level, understanding that White Walker threat that's coming for all of us here in any Western country that I have labored for years to try to expose, that is being exposed in front of our eyes right now. I didn't have a crystal ball, and neither did the people that informed me and the sources that I've cited over and over again that have documented this upside down, forwards and backwards for decades that nobody saw because it was either censored, shadow banned, ridiculed, or just simply not presented to people. They wouldn't have had access to this information, let alone the information we're going to go through today. That's going to blow your mind if you haven't seen it before. So please, sit tight, stay with me, at least hear this side, at least hear this information before fixing your brain into an immovable place where you're just gung-ho and ready to do exactly what the people who are trying to capture your country want you to do. We need to think this through. This is extremely important. I can't stress it enough. And so I want to open up with, I think this is the right clip here. Yeah, this is the right clip. So one of our Canadian journalists, his name is escaping me at this moment, but he's pretty popular. He got an interview with Steve Bannon. Okay. Now, forget about opinions about Steve. Just listen to what he's going to say. All right. Because you can always go and independently validate these things. And just it's a different way of seeing. Look, when everybody's talking about Trump and Orange Man and he's so greedy and he's evil and he's literally Hitler and he's just coming in, he just wants Canada's minerals and all this stuff. Where are you getting that? What do you know about it? Honestly, I just want to know, right? Like, what do we really know? Maybe what's being presented to you is not the full context of what's really happening. And maybe there's another side to the story that you might want to pay attention to before jumping on the jump to conclusions, Matt, and off you go, right? So we're going to go through some stuff today that is at least worthy of your consideration before you render a judgment and before you start going gung-ho and following the suicidal path that our politicians are telling Canada that we have to go down, which is to engage in an absolutely insane tariff war or trade war with the United States. Even if you think that Trump is in the wrong here, it's a path to complete destruction that we will not win. It's impossible. It is physically, financially impossible to win that fight. So that's what we need to start thinking about is, okay, regardless of where you're at, what is the solution? Because we're being told to join something called Team Canada right now. Okay. And because it says Team Canada, this is a brilliant PR strategy by people who have allegiances to globalist institutions and that are walking side by side with members of the Chinese Communist Party. Okay. And other Iran, right? India, other nations have their fingers in Canada. We need to know this. The cartels, the drugs, the human trafficking, the weapons trafficking, the international terrorism networks, the underground banking world that maybe you've never heard of before, that you need to listen up to learn about, because it plays into It's the background information that nobody's thinking about when they're just reading a few headlines, scrolling social media, listening to a few talking points from our politicians, who are all unifying the conservatives, the NDP, the liberals. They are going full uniparty right now in the same way that they did during the pandemic, where they completely walked past the already in place Canadian pandemic preparedness response system. And they instead immediately, without debate, without any scientific discussion in this country, adopted the Chinese model of how to deal with the pandemic that China caused, the CCP party specifically. So we have to really think about, well, that's an interesting thing to really consider. Why did that happen? How is that even possible to happen, right? And then you got to look in the background of the World Health Organization, all these other organizations that play into it. And what you're going to start to see is that we are involved, and we have been in a long time. We are involved in an international crime operation here. There's a crime syndicate going on here, and there's many competing factions within those crime syndicates that are basically taking the piss out of Canada. And they've been doing it a long time, and our politicians have done nothing at the very least, and at the very most are complicit in this. This is shocking information to the average normie Canadian who's just, drinking Tim Hortons and thinking everything's good to go. And why the hell would Trump just kind of come in here and start wanting to, like, what's going on and what's up with this talk about fentanyl and borders and tariffs and all, like, what's going on? So unless you get the backdrop, you're not going to know. So let's get into this clip. I'm going to play it, and then I've got some more for you here. I think this is the right clip. Here we go.
He is not trolling the Canadians. He's certainly not trolling your prime minister, who he refers to as your governor.
So the part that I think a lot of Canadians wouldn't get, and first off, people will be angry, and there's a very emotional response. And Donald Trump, by talking about the 51st state and the tariff issues, may actually help reelect Trudeau's Liberal Party with Mark Carney as the new leader. But the part that a lot of Canadians would be scratching their heads at and saying, well, that doesn't make any sense. There's no aggressive war with China. There's nothing with Russia. We don't have to be worried. We're past the point of needing to be worried about defense, is the view of a lot of people.
The view of anybody that thinks that is sound asleep. And let me wake them up. Number one, let's go back to World War II, of which, remember, Canada has shed more blood per capita than probably any democracy in the West in pursuit of freedom. Okay? The bravery and courage of the Canadian people can't be questioned. It's unbelievable what you guys have done. But I think now you got to think about, what was that all for? If you go back to World War II, if we're looking at the same place like in 1939 after the invasion of Poland, when the war really actually kind of got going, not the preamble to it, which was a long lead up. There were not that many casualties even through the fall of France. Look what's happened in Ukraine in 3 years, and we've been adamantly opposed to any involvement in Ukraine. It was ridiculous. As President Trump reiterated today, 1.5 million people have either been slaughtered or wounded in this war. 1 million Ukrainians and 750,000 Russian troops. Ukraine looks like Kiev. If you look at the carnage that's gone on, you throw in the Middle East, it's far greater than the early years of the Second World War, and we saw how that ended. If you also look at the Chinese Communist Party, unrestricted warfare, the Chinese Communist Party has been at war with the United States since May of 1989. Xi said it, the People's War. They're doing it through cyber. They're doing it through political warfare. They're doing it through information warfare. They're doing
political interference in Canada.
Canada, you guys are much far. Look, as badly as we're infiltrated, Canada's actually worse. And Trudeau's exacerbated this. This is something the Canadian people got to wake up to. You're losing your sovereignty as you speak. That's why your crisis on your northern border. The irony in Canada, given everything through valor of arms and courage that you've defended, now what was always strategically your greatest, the thing you had greatest, which was your northern border and kind of the Arctic, now becomes your greatest exposure to actual losing territorial integrity and sovereignty, the Chinese Communist Party, which has already infiltrated Canada. Look at Huawei. Look at all the situations in Canada. They're at war just because, remember, in Chinese Communist Party doctrine, if they have to start like Sun Tzu, if they have to start shooting, they think the kinetic part, which has already started in Europe and Ukraine, the kinetic part of the war is where they don't want to take on the foreign devils, right? Because the foreign devils know how to man up and know how to fight. What they want to do is unrestricted warfare, is defeat the West even before any guns are fired. And they're quite far advanced in the United States, and I would argue they're farther advanced in Canada. So don't people sit there and go, well, we're not really at war. That's like people in Europe in 1930, in the summer of 1939, sitting there going, we're actually not at war. It's a beautiful summer here in the clouds.
Where's the lie? It's like, first of all, absolutely brilliant of him to show good recognition to the brave Canadian military that went to fight for freedom. That was the whole point of it. My grandmother, my great grandfather, my grandfather, both sides of my family were involved in that. My grandmother worked in Ottawa. She was in the Canadian RCAF, and she was working as a seamstress for the military. She was recognized. She recently had passed away at the age of 99. My great grandfather worked for the Dutch underground against the Germans. He was arrested and put in concentration camps, had to walk home from Germany after the war. My grandfather, my other side, was a code decipherer for the British and actually worked on the Enigma machines, etc. So like when you realize what World War II, there was a whole situation there where the West was compromised from within. And I've done shows previously showing the financial backing of the people that brought that war into being for their own designs to get rid of the idea of these national states, these nation states, the idea of individual sovereignty or the sovereignty of nations, and replace it with this new world system. That to me is the bigger war, the bigger level of this. That's the White Walker threat I'm talking about, is these globalist, high-level elite private banking dynasty families and roundtables and criminal cartels that you've never been told about, that are really behind. They're really the movers and shakers that are financing both sides of a lot of these conflicts. But that doesn't say anything about the actual brave men and women that represented Canada in that war, and that the amazing accomplishments that Canada has accomplished. I was so happy to hear Steve Bannon point that out, and I want to reiterate that to all the people calling me traitor and all this stuff, right? Just for thinking out loud. So, but that's a key thing. He brings up a really good point. Canada and a lot of people in the West have no idea we are in World War III. We are in a war. These events that you're seeing, Russia, Ukraine, the pandemic, economic collapses, all of these things, even what's going on, Israel, Gaza, all this stuff, none of these things are happening in isolation. These are just the pot boiling over into a kinetic, obvious war situation. But that's just a symptom of the deeper war that's been happening. It's a clandestine war that's run off something called irregular warfare, which is a communist Chinese military strategy. They weren't the ones that invented it. Well, maybe they were. This is an old civilization, but it was done in Russia. It was done in North Korea. It was done in Africa. It was done in Cambodia under Pol Pot. It was done in so many of these different places with these totalist ideologies coming in. And this is the way these people move and take over. They don't just walk in. They're not the alphas in the room. These are the betas. These are the people that really only work in the world of infiltration, espionage, manipulate the public perception, capture the institutions from within, long march to the institutions, the slow gradual takeover, all these things. That's the tactics. It's documented about how these types of regimes work. Okay. So he's highlighting that and saying, if you don't understand that you are at war and that the casualties in the war he's talking about, this invisible war that's been going on, is the evidence of that war is the current situation politically and economically in Canada. That's how you can start looking at it. And he's also saying America was also infiltrated, which is something that the Americans and the media will never tell you about, the real true story about the rise of President Trump and how that came to be and why he has had all guns pointed to his head by all of the worst people. I'm talking George Soros, Klaus Schwab, Yuval Harari, all the top guys, the Club of Rome, the CFR, the UN Security Council, enemy foreign nations, the media complex, right? When you follow the money, a bigger story emerges. And so I think what we have to understand is we're in a totally different situation than we think we are as a country. And the average Canadian citizen is so far behind the curve in understanding this that they're jumping to conclusions. And we're at a point where it's so sad to me that all it is a freaking hockey game in people's heads. They're just competitive and tribalistic against America in Canada. We've been groomed for that. We've been raised with that. That British snooty look down your nose at those dirty, horrible, evil Americans with their freedom and their constitution, right? Masking our jealousy with hatred, right? That's how it works. It's weaponized. So when people, so people equate it to, well, American hockey team and Canadian hockey team, and we're going to beat you. You guys come in and threaten us with tariffs and blah, blah, blah. It's not the Canadian people that are being threatened with these tariffs. This is one way that Trump and the Americans have chosen to deal with the problem in our criminal captured government, crown corporation setup that is really the root of all of this. And the fact that their response to this wasn't to hear out the issues with the border that Trump was raising, hear out the issues with the infiltration, deal with the problem that Trump knows way more about it than a lot of Canadians do because he's got access to information most people don't. But thank God we have the information that I'm going to show you because we do have journalists in Canada that are covering exactly this. And so that if you're not on that understanding of the bigger context of that greater war, you're going to miss what's going on. You're going to misunderstand what's happening. All of Western civilization is in the targets of these international foreign groups that we're going to be covering. Because it's the only thing that would ever stop them. It's the only thing that would ever be capable of thwarting that agenda for world control, a world government's control system. All right. That used to sound crazy, but today, I remember back talking about this whole world government thing, in the early 2000s, and people were like, that will never happen, Dave. That's ridiculous conspiracy theory stuff. Now, you know what the argument is? Because it's just so obvious that that's what's being set up all around us with this great reset. And so many other things we could get into that I've already covered endlessly. That now that's not the argument I get from the average Canadian. They don't deny that. They're actually just for it. They want it. They agree with it. That was the rhetoric before yesterday in Canada, was because our politicians here were all like, rah, rah, UN, rah, rah, first post-national state, rah, rah, here, fly the Ukrainian flag, fly the Palestinian flag, fly all these flags. Don't fly the Canadian flag. It's a symbol of hate and bigotry. The old Canada is gone. We're bringing in the new Canada, right? It was all that. And then all of a sudden yesterday, they're like, no, let's be patriotic again. Fly that flag and show your colors. And it's just, the hypocrisy is staggering. And the average Canadian can't see it because they're blinded by the fact that they're thinking tribal rivalry between hockey teams. They're on that level of analysis here. And then, of course, they're threatened. They feel scared. Everybody feels scared. I feel that. I understand that. You feel scared. You're like, holy shit. Yeah, this will devastate our economy. Well, but why will it devastate our economy? 25% tariffs versus, say, on April 1st, we're supposed to get a 20% hike in carbon taxes. Nobody's freaking out and getting patriotic and worried about that, which that carbon tax system is really just a scam run by these very globalist deep state actors that I'm talking about to scam you out of your money. They're thieves. And they just build something that is appealing to you because you love the environment, and they weaponize that. That's how propaganda works. They take something that they know you're going to latch onto. They feed you the poison pill. They keep dripping it in. Now you're fighting for them, and you're not fighting for Canada by fighting for those carbon taxes, right? So that's the thing. There's the hypocrisy in the Canadian mind isn't just because we're taking shots at Canadians. They're victims of mass manipulation, and they're not seeing the forest through the trees. And so that's why shows like this exist, to try to help at least give you the other side of it so you can make a better determination of what's really going on. So we're at a war. This is the thing. We're in a war. It's a war. It's a global war, but the targets are the West, the Western values, the systems, everything. And it's all written down in black and white, by the way. The new system needs to be, for these globalist types at the top, they want a system without the international sovereignty. They want a system of complete and total dominion. And we don't know about that because we've been listening to the wrong sources who are compromised media sources, compromised government agents, compromised bringing foreign assets in here, and then we're not even getting into the situation in our universities, which many Canadian professors who have now had to leave and flee to America due to the persecution they faced have tried to warn Canada about for over 30 years now. So we're in a bad situation, not because big bad orange man is coming in here and putting tariffs on us. He's doing what the American people voted for him to do, which is to protect their country from this globalist threat that for some reason Americans can see, but Canadians can't. I don't know why, but we need to understand this. Now, that doesn't mean we have to immediately conclude that 51st state is the only solution for Canada. Although I'm in the position where I don't really know what other options we have given the clock that's ticking down. But it does mean that this conversation is valuable because it's going to help us have the conversation about the problems that we need to address in this country before we start looking down our nose at the Americans right now, who are actually in a position, and they're one of the only countries in the West right now that are actually taking this on head on and exposing it. And all the mainstream media is doing is just trying to attack every aspect of it because they're trying to protect their criminal enterprise. It's just simple as that. So I'm going to get into this next clip here. Before we get into this one, let me just refresh your memory for anybody that's just tuning in. And also maybe people out there watching this for the first time have never even heard this. They don't even know what the World Economic Forum is, who Klaus Schwab is, what that whole network is all about, and what they've actually said. So this was said during the pandemic, okay? I just want to play it, and then you'll understand where I'm going with it.
What we are very proud of now, the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more, half of this cabinet, are for our.
So that's not AI. That's documented. That happened. He said that openly, that not only have we been infiltrated by China, Iran, India, etc., we've also been infiltrated by this globalist roundtable group that I've been covering for a long time. I've done a lot of deep dives into analyzing who they are, getting into the history of the royal family, getting history of the Crown Corporation, getting into the history of the banking cartels, the Federal Reserve System, the selling out of Canada in 1974 to the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland, right? So when you're talking, whoa, about Canadian sovereignty, boy, do we have to rewind the tape and start from the beginning if that's where you're thinking. The truth is, the hard truth, the hard pill we have to swallow is to understand that we've already been captured. We've already been captured. And now we're in a position where it is impossible to know for sure who to trust in the government because nothing's been done about that infiltration, about that criminal activity that's been going on behind the scenes, about this underground banking empire, this underground network, this trafficking network that everybody needs to learn about and hear. Okay, I played some stuff from former FBI Director Ted Gunderson about the ports between Vancouver and Seattle that are involved in trafficking young children in human trafficking, and that he was reporting on this in the frickin' 90s. All right. So we've been sort of this forgotten land, Canada, where the world forgot about us because it just didn't seem to matter. Everybody's just assumed Canadians are just super polite and everything must be fine. And yet I think we've been a hidden empire of criminality and activity from some of these foreign networks that we're looking for a backdoor into the United States because the United States is the only country that can militarily stand up to these globalists and Chinese and foreign power brokers, right? And I won't get into the history of the CFR and China and Kissinger and Brzezinski and all of that. Again, too many tangents here. There's just so much to catch up on if you're new to this. Okay, so welcome. Pull up a chair. We got a lot to discuss. All right, and a lot of it's going to be extremely emotional and hard to hear, but it is what it is. Now, this is just a quick video clip. I'm trying to remember which report this was. I had posted this during the lockdowns, and this is just some of the media coverage, because you have had some interesting media coverage over the past few years in the background. And I think a lot of Canadians didn't really pay attention to this whole saga. So let's just start with this one and we'll move on.
Turning now to a global news investigation. Sources say Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was warned by Canadian intelligence that China is allegedly targeting Canada with a sweeping campaign of foreign interference, including trying to influence a recent election. Global's Sam Cooper is joining us now with more. Sam, there is a lot to unpack here, but let's start off at the beginning and when this information first came to light.
This information first came to light as I investigated allegations of China's vast interference into Canada's society at all levels, according to the source information I gathered. The information, sources say, was briefed up to senior Canadian officials, including Prime Minister Trudeau, this year, 2022, starting in January. And the source information from briefs and we're told of memos is that, yes, China has been allegedly covertly funding a clandestine network of Chinese Communist Party affiliated candidates in the 2019 Canadian federal election. It's alleged that the Chinese consulate in the city of Toronto has directed or did direct a large clandestine transfer of funds into this network to covertly advance the People's Republic of China's interests in the election. And I should say very clearly, this is the election allegations are shocking, but the intelligence information I've gathered say that this campaign ranges into Chinese intelligence infiltration, harassment, attacks on Chinese Canadian diaspora communities, coerced repatriations in what's known as the covert fox hunt operations run by Beijing in many countries, but
all right, sorry about the aspect ratio on that one. I don't know what the hell happened to that, but that's journalist Sam Cooper, who this was one of the original reports I saw from him where he started talking about this. And this is what got the whole conversation in Canada about what was known as the 11 traitors, the 11 names of these traitors, these people that they call them the traitors, but these are the infiltrators within the Canadian parliamentary cabinets, the government. And we're going to get into how it's probably far worse than that. And since that whole story broke, there was something set up called the Hogue Commission, which to me is just, when you look at the guts of it, and Sam Cooper did all the research on this. You got to get his book. We'll get into that in a minute, where he goes into the whole history of that. And basically, it's the government investigating itself and finding itself innocent. It's sort of like what they did with the convoy inquiry and everything else, right? So, but Sam Cooper wrote a book. Do I have it here? Let me show it to you here. Just get my... Where did I put it? Ah, here we go. Yes. Bring this up for you. Okay, so it's called Willful Blindness, How a Criminal Network of Narcos, Tycoons, and Chinese Communist Party Agents Infiltrated the West. So he's talking about the West, but there's a lot about what's going on in Canada when it comes to this. I can't recommend this book enough. I just started reading it myself after the interview that we're going to go through. We're going to go through pieces of this recent interview with Sam Cooper because he dropped some bombshells. This is just earth-shattering information for the average Canadian, and it's all thoroughly vetted, sourced, and documented. And the funny thing is that Sam Cooper right now is kind of the main guy talking about it and getting the traction. But there have been many people that I've interviewed, that I've spoken to off record, in police services, in intelligence services, in military, in journalists, people that are behind the scenes, people that are from China that came here and were trying to warn us, because there's a lot of great Chinese people that have come to Canada that were trying to flee the Beijing Communist Party, and then warn Canadians. And I met a lot of them at a lot of the rallies and the protests and whatnot during the pandemic. And they were sitting up there going, good for you, Canadian truckers. You have to fight back. If only we had fought back earlier in China to this predatory force that's coming in to capture institutions. So anyways, just want to point you in that direction. You got to get this book. It's an absolute jaw-dropping thing from start to finish. All right. Now, yeah, we'll stop sharing that. There we go. Now let's get into, you know what? Maybe before we do it, I just had a couple images to pull up here for you. Get this out of the way before we get into this interview. Just a few little side points here. Let's see if that, okay, we're going to bring this over here. Okay. So this comes from, you know what? I'm going to blow it up. I can't read it from there. There we go. This comes from a Telegram channel. They captured a lot of, there's a Telegram channel. What the hell's the name of it? China captured Canada or something. And what they've done is just chronologically documented the news reporting on all this infiltration from the CCP party. This was a global news article, February of 2021. And it just says this: Canada's public safety minister says that he can only assume that security agencies permitted an arrangement allowing a Chinese police-owned company to operate Canada's visa application center in Beijing. According to Bill Blair, who was speaking during a meeting between members of the Special Committee of Canada-China Relations, the assumption can only be made on his part as the subcontracting of the center's operation was put in place during the time of the previous Conservative government in 2008. Interesting. Blair's comments come as a response to questioning from several committee members over the arrangement, which was revealed earlier this month, a report from the Globe and Mail. The Globe's report revealing that a Chinese police-owned business, the Beijing Shushangong, whatever, foreign service company, was operating Canada's visa application center in Beijing and was ultimately in charge of collecting details of people applying for visas to Canada and other countries. The report also found that several workers in the center were members of the Communist Party, a regime that has either punished or arrested dissidents trying to flee the country. So this is just like the mainstream media coverage of this. And of course, yeah, Bill Blair is going to go after the Conservatives. But the funny thing is, he isn't entirely wrong. What Canadians need to realize is that when we call it the Uniparty, we're not joking around. We've had many things done during the Harper administration and the Trudeau administration that have sold Canada out both to these globalist internationalists and to these Communist Party agents in China and other countries. Okay, so just giving you a little background here. What's this next one? Yeah, there it is. This was a HuffPost article back in 2012. Okay. Stephen Harper's aggressively selling Canada's tar sands and other energy and natural resources to China and willing to give it investor rights unavailable to Canadian firms operating domestically. And I'm just giving you the snapshots. You got to get into each case here and dive in and find out just how many hooks and talons the Communist Chinese Party and other nations that are hostile to Western values and are seeking to take over our resources, just how bad it's gotten in this country. It'll blow your mind. What's the next one? This is getting into a little bit of the history, just to, again, it's obvious when you start comparing everything here that this is Pierre Elliott Trudeau speaking extremely highly of Mao Zedong, going to meet him regularly, right? Also Castro, and basically opening the door in his era, right? And then look, we have Justin Trudeau continuing on that legacy, and day one comes into office, whatever it was, a decade ago, talking about how we're going to make Canada the first post-national state. Do you know what that means, Canada? What is a post-national state? Post meaning after, right? So you're all getting told by the people who are globalists that are working and embedded with other countries and unelected global bureaucracies and roundtable groups that they're saying they want to make Canada first post-national state. And now those people are telling you to become patriotic for Canada. Do you see the problem here? I think it's because people like Trump and what's going on in America and the intelligence agencies in America have been watching this whole thing happen. Okay. And as those agencies are being taken back from the captured elements in the US, this information is going to hit like a tsunami wave. So all I'm here to do is tell you to put your seatbelt on and brace yourself, because you're about to get a garden hose or a fire hose level of information, as the average Canadian is going to get this information about just how bad it's been and what's really going on about all this discussion about 51st state and tariffs. Okay. This is an old story that you need to catch up with. This is not something that just happened in the last little bit. And then, of course, just a picture of the Uniparty all smiling there. There's Pierre, Jagmeet. We got David Eby, who's he definitely snuck his way into the provincial election recently here for British Columbia. And then Justin Sockboy right there in the background, hanging out with these organizations who are all funded and in bed with the Chinese Communist Party. So there's a couple little things I wanted to bring to your attention before we get into Sam Cooper's interview, which is going to knock your socks off. Okay. The reason it knocked my socks off is I've already independently done a lot of digging into this. And again, I've already spoken to a lot of people. Some of these interviews I've done publicly over the years, and some of them I couldn't do publicly for safety concerns. Okay. But here it is. I believe this is the right clip. Some of these clips might be out of order because I had to just ram all of this in. So let's just check it out. And I want to start covering this bit from Sam Cooper here. Okay, never mind. That's just the trailer. So let's go to, I think this is the next one.
Why don't we just remind everybody who you surmise they are?
Yeah, to my memory, and this was carefully prepared, chronologically I detailed, starting with Premier David Eby and mentioning that a very key Beijing-friendly journalist by the name of Ding David Guo, who is David Eby's advisor, I had found in my research, both from open source records and diaspora sources, surprisingly, since David Eby is purportedly a left-wing, NDP politician, David Ding Guo had also been influential. I learned in the conservative leadership race of Patrick Brown, which failed in 2022. Right. So I mentioned that. I then proceeded to say that my intelligence, which has proven 100% accurate, in all reviews that have followed, I named a number of names in reports, but I came out at that press conference and said I had not at my previous media employer, Global News, named Minister Mary Ng. However, through multiple sources, that the ones that had read my book, Willful Blindness, and risked their careers to bring information to me over the past years, indicated that Mary Ng, a Markham area MP who replaced former Markham area MP John McCallum, was allegedly one of the Toronto area 11 candidates supported by clandestine Beijing influence networks in the 2019 federal election. And after getting that support, quickly became a cabinet minister for Prime Minister Trudeau. And so importantly, unlike others that I was told of, it was assessed, according to my information from sources, that Minister Ng would be classified as one of those candidates who was not witting of receiving this underground support from influence networks consistent of Chinese consulate officials in Toronto, staff members of various politicians are involved allegedly, so-called community leaders or community groups with proxies run by Beijing would be involved, and Canadian politicians. This is what's called the United Front clandestine networks. And so when we talk about 11 candidates, I did believe, very important to say, that my information, which is proven 100% accurate, pointed towards Minister Ng. And so I had tried various ways and times to reach her directly to ask her for comment, and I had sought comment through the Prime Minister's office and not received it. So after that press conference with Kevin Vuan, I did see that Minister Ng tweeted on X saying that, she was not involved in anything like this and never involved in any inappropriate activity. And she actually, I can remember her post.
Okay, sorry, that was brutal. The aspect ratio is just bonkers in this system. So I'm going to do a different way of sharing these clips. But he's just giving you a little background into how he discovered this. He's naming specific names of people that have been demonstrated to be completely involved with the CCP that are at a very high level in the Liberal cabinet. Okay. So he's just setting that stage. Now, this next one, I'm just going to do this. I'll do this as a screen share. Maybe I'll go like this. So just bear with me here, guys. I got to do it like this now. Okay, let me pull that up. All right. Okay. Oh, it's not wanting to do it, is it? Oh, this sucks. I am just handicapped with this right now. Okay. I'm going to figure out a better way to do it. Just give me 1 second here. Oh, local video. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. Okay, this is how we're going to do this.
Very importantly, I mean, the documents that
Here you go.
I read, to form my reporting in 2022 and 2023, and documents now disclosed in the Haut Commission say that under Xi Jinping, the United Front ramped up to tens of thousands of cadres, and she elevated this United Front, which is called, in Chinese language documents, a magic weapon for the Chinese Communist Party to influence abroad. And as the CIA says, it's a high-level core entity of the party to exert control over the 1.4 billion masses in mainland China. I don't know, 99% of which would not be, or more, not Chinese Communist Party members.
So let's talk about NSICOP. There is allegedly 11 total parliamentarians in there that are wittingly or unwittingly or semi-wittingly collaborating with foreign states against the interests of Canada. We've talked about one of them, Parm Baines. We've talked about a couple of them. Do you have any inkling on who the entire 11 are? And this is where it gets a little touchy, I know, because there's a question of evidence and there's a question of, there's other questions.
Yeah. So, I mean, to get back to it, my reporting for Global pointed to 11 in the Toronto area alone, and that's in 2019. These are candidates, 7 Liberal candidates, 4 Conservative. So in the Toronto area, and the document I read and reported upon was a Privy Council office document from the Intelligence Assessment Secretariat vetting 100 CSIS reports. So in terms of intelligence, it doesn't get more solid than that. We have 2 agencies and, a vetting and filtering process and a very limited statement I read. And so 11, some witting, some not witting. Marrying, being a minister, being extremely close to the inner power circle of the Trudeau government and office having capacity to make appointments, judges, should be crown corporations, all kinds of, right? People that came to me and risked their careers and more felt it very important that marrying be named among those 11 and yet not among the witting. So other politicians in the network were named at this point because of something that I am I'm not happy, that I call lawfare activity, and really ongoing lawsuits that involve global news. I don't want to reiterate names that came out beyond that, right, that global news is involved in, but my own work, continuing work, I've said, that's 11 in Toronto. Parm Baines is out in Vancouver.
Right.
Kenny Chu egregiously attacked. If there's anyone in Canada that would like to step forward and debate me and say Kenny Chu was not attacked by Beijing from the highest levels, words escape me of a type of person that would argue that, but Parm Baines very clearly benefited. Was he witting? Was he naive? Was he unwitting? Did monies flow that we haven't heard about? I'm not sure. But I do believe, very important to say, Mr. Baines was the winner. Kenny Chu was a loser. Parm Baines in Richmond and British Columbia, which is very important if there's a close election, supporting leadership candidate Mark Carney. So I don't think anyone should lose sight that this is a very important case, whether Parm Baines was witting or not. Hey, look, Mark Carney is a smart person, reportedly. He wittingly is out there with Parm Baines campaigning. I'm witting that I can see a United Front Work Department operative posing with both of them. So let's focus on the future and what could be happening to this election. Beyond that, Michelle Junot-Katsia told you about 50. Well, yes, I've reported that based on Chinese Communist Party documents that experts in the diaspora, could provide to me, and I could assess and go to Charles Burton, internationally respected sinologist and Mandarin reader, to read and assess the document. I reported for the Bureau that in 2019, 40 candidates were endorsed, with great vigor by the United Front Work Department entities, and I can read this in a document. So this fits with what I was told by a very important source, that 11 in Toronto is one number, but 40 to 50 should be the number of candidates supported by Beijing that some people of integrity in Canadian intelligence believe is the real figure, around 50 supported by China. That's what we should be afraid of in this coming election.
Okay, a lot there. I'm just going to hide this for a second. Shocking information, right? Not shocking to people who've been paying attention, though. I just got to say that. And there's many Canadians, I want to tell my American friends, many Canadians, and we're talking from my level of just local guys, local people that are doing this, to intelligence, police, journalism, right, have been following this story and know how bad the corruption has gotten and just how brutal it is. Okay. When he's talking about Mark Carney hanging out with these types of people that are implicated in, he's looking at intelligence that came from over 100 CSIS reports, and then compared that to the Beijing information that he had translators give him and everything. The level of journalistic research here is actual journalism. It's something rare that we don't really see happening in Canadian media. And yet the mainstream media is just going to all go as a chorus to try to shout down Sam Cooper and his information while not presenting any real counter information. And that's just how these types of regimes roll. And we saw this during the pandemic, the same thing. Actual doctors who've worked in Canada for decades, who are highly esteemed, who've written scientific papers, some of them have their own inventions and shit, they were just shouted down by some global news reporter or some fake TV doctor, right? That's going to come out and try to take out these other Canadian doctors that were trying to warn Canadians about what was really going on when it came to that medical system capture that happened during the pandemic. It's the same system, and it's not separate from this issue. They're all symptoms of this greater clandestine war I'm telling you about and that Sam Cooper's telling you about. You have to go listen to the whole interview. And I'm sorry the aspect ratio cut. I tried to put I want to make sure I give a shout out to Northern Perspective. You can go check them out on YouTube, Northern Perspective. Please go subscribe. Check out the whole interview. They just dropped it yesterday. And I'm grateful that they did it, and they deserve full credit. And you need to go and follow up on what Sam Cooper's been reporting when it comes to this. Okay. Now there's more. Now, what was some of the other things he said? So, yeah, we heard about the 11 traders. That's just Toronto. And that's just what's known. He's talking 50 or more when we're talking at the federal level of Canada. CCP connected through these groups. Okay. Now, I want to make sure I get the right clip. Like I said, I had to zip this together. That one's there. Let me just quickly screen this one. I think this is it. So it doesn't stop there. Yeah. Okay. This is it. All right. So let's do this next one. It's about 1:45. Just pull this in again. All right. Take it away, Sam Cooper.
Open source records. So it doesn't stop there. Mr. Parmbane's, a week later, shortly before the election, individuals that can be seen visually in meetings with Xi Jinping at the highest level presidential United Front Work Department meetings are there campaigning with Parmbane's and offering him support. So I say, this fits what I read in NSI Cop was there was a textbook case of foreign interference in which someone benefited. And I believe that report indicated it was wittingly benefited, right? So Mr. Baines says he didn't benefit from anything inappropriate. But extending it a little further here, I have noted and reported very recently for the Bureau that Parmbane's campaigning in Richmond with Mark Carney, the Liberal frontrunner, in that crowd is a high-level United Front official for the area. This is all open source record. And so it appears that we have a pattern here forming leading right into the leadership contest for an election if it happens, this year.
100%. And for those wondering about the United Front reference, there is an organization called the United Front Work Department, and that is essentially the organization that reports directly into the Beijing government. For those that are wondering, so when Sam refers to a United Front type of operation, that's what we're talking about. So.
Yeah, just to know about that United Front, and there's many of these other front groups, okay? This is how criminal rackets operate. This is how these communist regimes operate. And this is extremely documented that this is how the Chinese Communist Party operates. And for anybody thinking that somehow Canada had all the right systems and mechanisms and checks and balances in place to protect this country from China, when our own leadership has been in bed with China for in their lineage, I don't know what to tell you if you believe that Canada is immune from this kind of infiltration. In fact, as Steve Bannon was pointing out, as bad as the infiltration that happened in the US is, because that is what happened, and that's what's getting cleaned up right now, and that's why all the media and everybody's freaking out, is because this criminal cartel is getting wrapped up and exposed for the world to see. And you're going to see that spill from America into Canada into all these other countries to find out just how deep this rabbit hole goes. Steve Bannon was saying, as bad as it is in the US, it is worse in Canada. And I happen to concur with that. And it's worse because We don't have the legal apparatus in place to even prosecute this. That's first and foremost. You can talk to border agents in Canada that'll tell you we don't even have the legal, our legal system is so messed up. Our laws are so messed up over these years of these bills being passed by all these different agents over time, or whether they're witting or unwitting. Anyways, this legislation gets in, and now the laws are all crisscrossed and backwards, and they can't even prosecute this issue with fentanyl, the drugs, the human trafficking, the weapons trafficking, the importing of hostile terrorist networks into Canada, etc. They're not talking about it, and they're not talking about why Canada is such a problem for the US if they're trying to drain that corruption in their country. And then Canada's sitting over here benefiting from the protection of the military of the United States, but not actively dealing with the problem that's happening behind our gates. These tariffs aren't for the average Canadian person, even though we're going to feel it. The responsibility lies on our leadership. That's where the squeeze is being applied, and it has to, because there's no other mechanism to flush this out. So whatever happens at the end of it, these are the talking points Canadians should be busying themselves discussing if they're truly patriotic to this country, rather than trying to shoot down people that are trying to warn them about it. And they don't understand that they're putting their trust in known liars and criminals. And that's the issue. So when you say Team Canada and we're here to fight for Canada, what do you mean by that? What is Canada in February of 2025 anyways? What is that? Could you define it for me, please? What is a sovereign, self-reliant nation? Look at that definition. Compare it to the current status of Canada, what's going on, and we're just tipping our toe in the door of this corruption. And then define it and compare it side by side and ask yourself, is Canada a sovereign, self-reliant nation that we're being told by our politicians? And what does that tell you about our politicians? Why won't they release this information to the Canadian public? Why is it sealed? It's like the Diddy lists and the Epstein lists, which thank God are about to drop, and it's probably going to ruin a lot of people's parties. It's going to go even deeper than just some drug, fentanyl, and, corrupt triad gangs and all. It's going to go deeper. Okay. But you got to see that this is a part of a wake up process that's going to happen for people in Canada and around the world. And we need to look behind our own door to see that we're facing a common existential threat here in the West, and it's not coming. It's not in the future. It's already crept behind the gates. Can't emphasize that enough. Now, this next clip, it's about 4 minutes, and it's really valuable because he gets into the way that these criminal gangs operate. And I think he's speaking specifically in regards to Vancouver and British Columbia. I live in British Columbia on the island here. But it's very relevant to just understanding how the entire operation works. So let's get into this one now. This is very, very fascinating. Here it is.
Onto the States too, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I like to say it's incredibly simple in a way, and it gets incredibly complex. But, how the casinos fit into this is really around the world. They have, of course, we have Chinese diaspora communities. Great people, many that have fled that thuggish regime. But what has happened is that regime, in wanting to protect itself and its interests, has reached out around the world and placed essentially thugs within communities, or supported, domestic thugs within those communities. And it uses those gangsters, brands them as community leaders, and they're used to monitor the communities. This has been happening for decades around the world, everywhere. But in cities like Vancouver and Toronto, with just such a proportion of a immigrant diaspora from Asia, it has become institutionalized, where the communities have these underground banks and casinos run by these thugs with the connections to the communist regime. And so a model developed. This is the Vancouver model. If you were a gangster, business person, anyone in China that wants to get around that capital export control, you make a deal with those gangsters, let's just focus in Vancouver, the underground bankers, and you say, okay, I have $1 million of corruption money in Shanghai. I'm going to put that money into Gangster A's bank account in Wuhan, where they make a lot of fentanyl precursors. I'm going to travel to Vancouver, meet Gangster A's associate, outside the River Rock Richmond Casino. He's going to give me $1 million in cash, in a couple of suitcases. I'm going to walk in and gamble it, right? So I've done that underground transaction, and the gang gets a little bit of a fee. And it got so complex and institutionalized, the person wanting to get their funds out of China did not even have to put the money down in Wuhan in gangsters, fentanyl traffickers' bank account. They just make a deal on, encrypted WeChat text, which is a social media app controlled by Beijing. And they say, yeah, we've done business. I met you in a Macau casino where gambling is legal. I'm going to meet you in Vancouver. I want, some cash. So, okay, I'll give you $1 million. We have a relationship. Gangster's going to gamble in Vancouver and then pay back that loan, minus 2%, 5% in Wuhan. And so, again, drug cash is the loan in Vancouver from this transnational gang, and it's paid back in Wuhan. So that's that loop. And, as I say, you've mentioned that these loans involve real estate. Yes, when you get that loan in Vancouver and you're going to pay back in Wuhan, it's secured by the gangsters with a lien against your home in Vancouver. So Vancouver, right across the city, just tremendous amounts of homes have these purported legal documents on them that are, it's a way to enforce the loan, and it could be on your Mercedes, and of course, there's a couple kinds of loaning going on. If you're a gangster and you got no problem paying back, okay, you might have a piece of paper with a 40% interest rate and never have to pay that. If you're a gambling addict in the diaspora and you have to pay that back, it's against your home, they'll take your home. They'll take your car. I researched cases in Canadian court files where they taped children. I'm sorry, I get a little emotional. They taped children to the wall and shot holes around them.
Oh,
right? So there's different types of lending going on. All of it's facilitating money going around the world. But there's also gambling addicts, and the community is being victimized by these big circle boys, which is the name of these transnational gangsters that have set up in Canada because we have weak laws.
Because we have weak laws and our government's captured by the same forces. They take children, they tape them to a wall, and then they shoot holes around them as a threat to make sure people pay up to this gang. It happens in Vancouver all the time, and much worse. And the whole thing about this whole gambling, this is the way they roll. They prey like any tapeworm or parasite. They prey on your weaknesses. Okay, so they prey on your gambling weaknesses, your drug weaknesses, and they're bringing in this fentanyl to get people hooked. Look at Vancouver. It's like The Walking Dead. Okay, it looks like Portland or something. It's just drug addicts all over the bloody place. Victoria, once an absolutely beautiful, beautiful city in British Columbia here in Canada. It's a shithole now. Sorry to say, it's a shithole. You're stepping over needles. They literally took over Beacon Hill Park, these homeless drug addicts. It's a sad state of affairs. Okay, but it's what people need to know is it's being allowed to happen because this is the model of this cartel. You prey on the weaknesses, you get the whole population hooked on your products, whether it's gambling and casinos that you've got, whether it's the drugs, whether it's the prostitution, whether it's the child's porn, whatever it is, and they get you all hooked on it, and now they got you by the balls. And then you got to understand how the criminal world operates in general. And that's just at the lower criminal level. What about the elite criminal level? What do you think is going to be coming out with all these Epstein, Diddy lists and Maxwell files and whatnot? Blackmail information, the way honeypots work in the intelligence world, the way you set up, you find the weaknesses of your target politician or anybody in some position of authority or trust. You get compromising photographs or videos of them. Now you got them by the balls and they work for you. Now think about your country and why everything's backwards and these people always say things on their political campaigns but never actually do them, and they do the bidding of China, Iran, the deep state, the globalists, they don't do the bidding of Canadians because they don't work for you, because the blackmail's on them. Either that or they're threatened. There's another mechanism. They can use threats to your life and your family because they control the board behind the scenes. They can use blackmail. They can use the smearing campaign because they've got their hands in the media. So they can just smear you publicly and then you're disgraced. And the blind public that just gobbles it all up without question just becomes a weapon. Right? Do you see how this works? It's not the up and up. Canada doesn't exist. We got to let that sink in. It doesn't exist the way you think it exists. Americans are getting that cold shower also, as is many other Western countries, because we didn't see this dark underworld happening around us. We didn't care about it. We were listening to the people that were in bed with financially these exact same cartels. Our legal system is banjaxed and captured. It can't do anything. It won't do anything. They're putting Canadian citizens in jail that were peacefully demonstrating against draconian measures by the government. Yet this shit is just running rampant in the streets to a degree that the average Canadian can't even fathom. That's the cold shower. And the people that are compromised by those, this is what I think, and many others as well, the people that are compromised by that type of racket that he just described, and he was just describing some casino, just that little branch of the tree of this evil in the casino world and in the drug world. But that same type of capturing system is happening in all levels of our institutions. That's how this system operates. That's how the mafia took over New York once upon a time. That's how these criminal networks operate. And for you to think that Canada is immune from this, please hear me. Please hear Sam Cooper. Please hear the voices that are begging you to understand, as some very important decisions are about to be made about our future as a country. You must factor this in. If you are not factoring this in, you are lying to yourself and you're lying to the people that you're talking about this to. And I understand why. And I know it's hard to hear and it's hard to come to terms with. And it's a massive ego hit to the average Canadian who is operating under a totally different premise. But the truth wins. It doesn't care how you feel about it. And the only way to any solution to any of this that will work out for the best for everybody involved is that the truth must be revealed. And we must have serious adult conversations about it without cutting each other's throats because we get emotionally charged because we've been listening to global news all day. We need to become the adults in the room and sit around once again and realize, just like Steve Bannon was talking about pre-World War II, when everybody thought, oh, it was just ponies and rainbows, didn't realize shots were already being fired before they even realized there was a big war going on. We're in the same boat right now. And if we don't want this to go to a kinetic war like what happened in Ukraine and what's happening all over the place right now, if we don't want it to go there, the only way is to really start to understand this and how this operates. Where's our police? Where's our intelligence services? Not to say that there aren't those people within those organizations that know exactly what I'm talking about. And I know them because I've spoken to them. But the system, the top level, is what's captured by these cartels. So you're at what do you do? Right? That's what a lot of these police officers that have talked to me and people have talked to me or said, what do I do? What do I do? The public is weaponized against this position. The leadership structure at the top is compromised by exactly what I've just described. So what are you going to do? And what's the average Canadian going to do when we're facing something like this? We're going to vote. We're going to do an election, right? And we're going to vote between two different representatives of everything I'm talking about. Or at least that we're concerned. There might be, we don't know everything about Pierre and some of these people, but we're very concerned, and we're rightly concerned. And now you got the Americans that have all this data on everything that's been going on. Of course, the deep state in America wasn't telling you about this shit. But as a new sheriff in town, that is. And he's the most hated man walking. Why? Why really? Because he's throwing a punch back. He's telling you what it is. And they know what's going on. And you also have to look at our law, our founding, our Articles of Confederation, the whole thing, and get into that tangled mess and go, holy smokes. We've got loopholes in here that have allowed for this to happen right in the framing of the country, let alone the systematic bringing in of all these new bills and laws and all these people over time that have further corrupted and eroded it. That's why we've seen this decline in Canadian prosperity. And there was one guy that did a video on X, or maybe it was on Facebook originally, and he was talking about that cowboy dude from Alberta that was out there talking like he's going to go on his horse with his 6-shooters and start taking pieces out of America or something like that, right? It's just emotional drama going on. And he's like, no, here's the reality, bud. You're going to be eating your horse. Right? If your government keeps acting in this manner, if this is not dealt with, and we know the Americans are not going to put up with it anymore, you're going to be eating your horse rather than riding it up into the fray to battle the enemy. When you're fighting the wrong enemy, you're fighting the wrong enemy. Your enemy is not Donald Trump and America. I don't care if you like him. It doesn't matter. It's not the enemy. The enemy is the enemy we're talking about. The enemy within the cartels, the international networks has been your enemy for decades. You just didn't know it. And America's not perfect and they got their problems too, but they're fighting back. And there's movements across the West to fight back against this. They're not fighting back. Like they've created a cartoon character out of this whole fight, making it look like it's Nazis versus communists. That's bullshit. This is about freedom and truth and facts versus the propaganda and the people that are trying to steal from you. So the whole scenario is backwards in people's minds because where do we get our information? You're only as good as your information. And if you got wrong information and you're making conclusions based on that wrong information that was given to you by people who are compromised, what does that say? And if we don't factor this in, it's going to be over if it isn't over already. If Canada isn't already over, because I have a feeling this deal's already done. Okay, I'm just going to be honest. I think this is already done behind the scenes. Canada is beyond repair in the old way. Now, that doesn't mean we couldn't reform and do, there's lots of things we could do, but not in the current situation with where the public mind in Canada is at. Not with this clock ticking down over our heads. Not with this level of we don't know who to trust in our country. That's the sign. All the signs of the greatest thinkers that wrote about this and warned about this, they've been vindicated. And my feeling is these types of Sam Cooper and these types of people, they're helping you get to just the first floor of this. And then we're going to get to the second floor. And then we're going to go all the way to the top. And we're going to break that glass ceiling. And you're going to be stunned, no matter what country in the world you live in, to realize how embedded we've all become with this corrupt underground world that you didn't even know existed. You didn't want to know it existed. And you spat in the face of anybody that tried to show you that it did. That's where we're at. Now, I think I got a couple more here. We'll do another one. This one's a short one. And it's crucial as well. You got to watch the whole interview. It's so good. But I just wanted to go through some of the more. Yeah, this one is like 37 seconds.
Indeed, as I continue to report for the Bureau, as I just believe it's so important, law enforcement in Canada and the United States is now on the record, with me saying we have concerns that the political class in Canada is very close and can be found in pictures close to senior Asian organized crime. So I covered a few bases there and circled back, but China, number one threat, India, Iran, yes, supporting politicians in Canada, other nations as well.
Our doors were opened, mass immigration, within a decade, complete demographic change in this country. What do you think's going to happen? Honestly, what do you think is going to happen? Your phone's getting lit up every day, probably like mine, with people trying to scam you. How's this allowed? What's going on? That's just the big. Why is the drug problem so bad in this country? There's a pandemic level of people dying of this fentanyl coming in. I literally witnessed, I'll tell you a quick little story about that. I was with a friend of mine. This was 2022. We were just going to the pub, going for a walk. And some homeless looking guy comes out and he's like freaking out. He's like, my buddy's dying. He's dying. You got to help us. My first instinct was, this is some kind of trap. Someone's waiting behind the door, going to shoot us in the head and steal all our shit. But anyways, I'm like, okay, let's go check this out. So we go in. Dude is having an absolute seizure on the ground because he overdosed on fentanyl. My buddy, thank God, springs to action. He's a trained paramedic or trained in that anyways. And he goes up and he basically saves this guy's life. Ambulance comes. Buddy's a hero. I glance in the closet as I'm walking out. Hanging in the closet is a Canadian veteran's jacket with medals on it. So this guy overdosing on fentanyl was a Canadian veteran. If we had not been there, he would be dead. This happens every single day right around me. Ambulances driving back and forth. During the pandemic, I spoke to 4 local paramedics. And I couldn't believe how many ambulances were driving by all the time. And these paramedics who were very awake about the bullshit that was going on during the lockdowns. One of them worked on Ground Zero in Vancouver and was like, we were waiting for Ground Zero to hit and it never did. But the media covered it otherwise. But we saw that it wasn't what they were saying it was. I asked him, why are the ambulances going crazy right now? And he said, well, are they all people dying from COVID or whatever? He said, no, people are dying of heart attacks and drug overdoses and suicides. He said those were the calls they were answering the most. I've had this validated I've even interviewed paramedics on my show a couple years ago that were talking about this. They were picking up drug overdoses is so big. It's a pandemic. Heart attacks. What the hell's up with that? And then of course, suicides because of the insanity of the lockdowns that nobody ever calculated. So it's so bad. And then you find out that there's recent reports of drug busts found in Toronto, in Vancouver, of levels of fentanyl that could kill every Canadian citizen 10 times over being found in these ports, in these containers. Less than 5% of the containers that go from Vancouver to the US and to all over, less than 5% of those containers are actually searched. And then we look at the missing children, and then we look at the whole situation. And you want to talk about being on Team Canada? What is that? That sounds good to your brain. It sounds good because it makes you think of hockey and supporting your country and being a patriot. And then you get to pretend to be virtuous. But what does it really mean to be patriotic? What does it really mean to love your people? What does it really mean to be somebody that is an advocate for your country and to see what's best for the people that live in that country? What does that really mean? What that means is you got to be honest. And I'm not seeing honesty coming from people. I'm seeing NPC behavior, repeating the same headlines and talking points that are coming from people like Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Justin Trudeau, Jagmeet Singh, the fake news, who's been proven wrong on so many things. I can't even do a podcast short enough to sum it all up. It would take me a week. And this is who we're trusting now to tell us to rally together and get into a fight with America? First of all, it's a suicide mission. Second of all, it's the wrong direction. So thank God we've got some honest journalists in here that are going to tell you the facts, and they're going to get very specific. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do. I can't get into every nook and cranny of this in this show, or it's going to be too long. You're going to have to follow up and do the time looking through the documentation, looking through the court case material, looking through what we already have, those 100+ CSIS reports. You can go look at that shit yourself. It's coming from your intelligence agencies. Then you can go to these journalists, and then you can go to citizen journalists that have been covering this, and you can go through it with a fine-tooth comb and validate it for yourself. It's so obvious. It's infuriating to me what's going on. It's like when I hear the reaction of the average Canadian and how they're taking this, it's infuriating to me. Because it's like, how do I get you to look at it? How do I make you look at it? I can't. And so what do you do? What do you do? It's not just bad enough that we're dealing with corruption in our government and all these institutions. The way the CCP party works, the way the communist playbook works, the way the totalist playbook in general, because we can get into all the isms and just realize that all of it is just cut from the same cloth. It's just different variations applied to different demographics of people. That's all it is. It's all the same program. Ring of power, right? How do you communicate that to the average person when you realize it's the people that have been turned into a weapon by this propaganda? That's how irregular warfare works. Weaponize the public mind. That's like 101. How to capture a nation from within. Go read some Yuri Bezmenov. The guy came over from Russia and told you the whole plan in the 80s. And here we are. It's happening. And the only people fighting back are vilified. By who? The establishment media and the establishment politicians that work for who? The very enemy we're talking about that wants you and everything you've got. They want you want to talk about America wanting our resources? Where the hell were you when Bill Gates rolled up and started buying all your farmland? Where were you when we realized that our politicians on both sides of the aisle were selling out our land and our resources to foreign nations? Where's the patriotism then? Where's the patriotism when Canadian children are going missing? Missing. Children just don't go missing and then are never found. Missing. Where are they? Where's your patriotism to those people? True patriot love for what? Hockey? That's all you got? Some hockey rivalries? I'm sorry, I'm a little bit miffed about that. It's just not going to cut it. And that's not the adult conversation that's been happening. This is the adult conversation, getting into the facts of what's really gone on. And we could change this anytime we wanted to if we had the political will and the public awareness to do it, but we just don't have it. And that clock is ticking down. And as the clock is ticking down on these tariffs that were meant to be a device to tell the Canadian swamp, hey, we've got you by the balls. Here's your clock. Fix the situation or we're coming in to fix it for you. And what are they doing? They're all getting pissed drunk and hanging out at hockey games. And you got Mark Carney going on mainstream media and just publicly stating, I'm a globalist. I'm an elitist. I hang out with like basically all the top business sharks in the world. That's where I come from. I'm hanging out with Wu Wei directors. I'm hanging out with members of the Communist Chinese Party and having a good old time. I'm out there in Davos, Switzerland, almost every other weekend hanging out with the World Economic Forum. And I'm going to be your new prime minister. It's a crazy situation. We've never been here before. We're a young country. We're still getting off our baby legs. And then we're already here. And now we're throwing stones at Americans for what? This isn't about them and you. This is about dealing with the real common enemy that we're all facing, that will exterminate everything you think you know about what it means to be Canadian and all that shit. They want you speaking Chinese, man. They want you speaking whatever it is they want you to speak. They want you speaking NPC. They want you repeating the script. They don't want you thinking for yourself. They don't believe in free speech. They don't believe in the rights of an individual. They don't believe in sovereignty at all. They come from a different worldview, a totally different world. They think differently. These globalists I'm talking about, they don't hail from one particular nationality or one particular political ideology. They are of their own. They are a breakaway civilization. They're internationalists. They don't think in terms of countries. They just show up, put the costume on of the country, and then bring in the globalist framework, taking your money, tax scam after tax scam after tax scam, inflating your currency, making you what? A slave to them, driving down the value of all your labor and your hard work and all the beautiful things you've produced in Canada. They want it for themselves. And then they put their puppets that look like you, talk like you, act like you, fly a flag once in a while, say a couple things that resonate with your limbic brain. And then you just go, yay, this is my Canadian, right? We are just the best of the best. Meanwhile, those kids are still getting taped to walls. Kids are going missing. People are dropping dead from fentanyl coming in. They're finding levels of this drug being brought in here that could wipe out our entire population times 10. These, how much, like how deep does it go? Is it only 50 people in our government? Or is this like a virus that has spread through to such a level that we don't even know yet, and we're just going to learn about it? So to me, that's the value of this whole 51st state because it's putting it in a different context for Canadians to really think about and go, hey, we got to put some pressure because you need to wake up. You need to wake up to realize you've been captured, how you've been captured, why you were captured, who captured you, and how to get out of it. So there's the quote. You got to go watch it, that whole interview. And then I just wanted to show you a couple links here. This is just mainstream shit, just kind of surface level, but it's important. This is from, make sure I got that big enough for you. Here, I'll bring my full screen. This is the Government of Canada website. I don't know what the date was on this report. Let's just go through a couple points. Port cranes and foreign interference. This is the Government of Canada website, okay? This isn't conspiracytheory.com. Ports and cranes and government interference. Transport Canada continues to work with security partners and marine stakeholders to assess current and potential threats that may arise from Chinese-made cranes and to take risk mitigation measures. In reference to spying capability, the key phrase in the recent Wall Street Journal article on Chinese-made cranes operating in the United States is could. Transport Canada is on alert for foreign interference, working with security partners and marine industry stakeholders to mitigate such risks. So, of course, it's all like, hey, we're working on the problem, guys. Nothing to see here. But we do admit that it's a big freaking problem. Let me go in your background. An article in the March 5th, 2023 edition of the Wall Street Journal reported that U.S. officials are growing concerned that giant Chinese-made cranes operating at American ports across the country, including several used by the military, could give Beijing a possible spying tool hidden in plain sight. The article noted that U.S. national security officials haven't detailed any instances of cranes being used to nefarious ends. On March 23rd, 2023, the Marine Safety and Security and the Intermodal Surface Security and Emergency Preparedness branches, that's a mouthful, conducted a call with select Port Authority and marine facility operators, as well as TC's Atlantic and Pacific regional personnel, to share available information and ensure a common understanding of the discussions surrounding these cranes. The call generated a discussion on the actual abilities and limitations of the cranes currently in Canada ports and learned that technical specifications are bespoke to each crane, and those specifications are identified as part of the contracting process. And they go through these bills that are supposedly there to fix the problem. I'm bringing this up simply to show you that there's been a discussion going on already, and it's right there in black and white all over the Canadian government website. You can go through these reports. You also look at those CSIS reports Sam Cooper was referring to. You can put it all together and realize that American intelligence and border security has been trying to alert Canadian government officials to this for a long time, only to be basically shown, oh, we're doing it, we're doing it, we're doing it. And the problem gets worse and nothing's really done to stop it. Trump knows this. He sees the intelligence data you don't see. He realizes where the threats are really coming from. He's got to deal with the southern border, and now he's got to deal with the northern border. There's a reason he's going after Greenland. Bannon broke it all down. This is about geostrategic defense of not just America, but the West. And it just so happens that our governments in the West are complicit in that process. And he's aware of that too. So, interesting. Next up. This one was an older article. I remember covering this a while back, but it bears repeating. Hold on. Where did it go? There it is. This is National Post. When was this? Yeah, March 2023. Trudeau was regularly briefed on foreign interference in elections. So we got this issue with elections too that we're all going to learn about. And this is from a national security advisor. Jody Thomas testified to a Commons committee that the problem is growing, with adversaries finding innovative ways to meddle. Ottawa. National Security Advisor Jody Thomas confirmed Wednesday Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has been briefed regularly about foreign interference in Canadian elections, which has been a persistent and growing threat coming largely from China. We won't go through the whole 5-minute video. Thomas was called to testify at a parliamentary committee looking into recent media reports that the Chinese government interfered through misinformation and potentially illegal donations with the aim of securing a liberal minority government. Thomas said the problem of foreign interference comes from many countries, but China is currently the most aggressive player. Isn't that what Sam Cooper just told us? Quote, we cannot paint an overly optimistic picture. Things change, tools and methods change. Our adversaries adapt quickly and find innovative ways to interfere in our affairs, so we must continue to learn, she said. Sean Tupper, Deputy Minister of Public Safety, also told the committee of MPs that it is a growing problem. It's more pervasive, he says. It's more aggressive, and the potential for damage to our democracies is that much more serious, he said. Tupper confirmed that the RCMP does not have any criminal investigations stemming from the 2019 or 2021 elections because the leadership at the highest levels of the RCMP is also compromised. I'm adding that. Okay, that wasn't what he said. Thomas and all the security and intelligence officials who testified declined to confirm the specifics of media reports that have been based on documents from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service leaked to journalists, but she said there is a broad problem. She cautioned that those leaks don't tell the whole story. Given the very nature of intelligence, individual reports taken out of context may be incomplete and misrepresentative of the full story. And they just go on because I'll bet you it's even worse than what we've been told. And again, that's me adding that. That's my opinion. So yeah, there's that one. These are just, I'm just giving you the lineage. This conversation has been going on in the background. You just don't, this isn't the viral stuff, right? The viral stuff is, what are the celebrities doing? When's Taylor Swift doing a concert here? Here's another problem. Why can't Canada convict any Chinese spies? The most recent Canadian failure to convict alleged Chinese agents is undermining American confidence that Canada won't be a sanctuary country. The most recent Canadian failure to convict alleged Chinese agents is undermining American confidence that Canada won't be a sanctuary for foreign spies. So this is an American publication, or at least it's a Canadian publication covering a report from there. And they're just talking about the concerns that have been going on in the US about Canada for a long time now, which is prompting where Trump is coming from. The US has let it known that it expects an updated China policies from Ottawa soon, particularly one for domestic security. According to the director of the FBI, half of the agency's 5,000 active counterintelligence cases in the US concern China, and one case is added every 10 hours. Chinese espionage cost the country of the US $225 billion to $600 billion a year. Wikipedia lists 33 convictions of people in the US spying for China, which 3/4 are ethnically Chinese. So again, there's been rumblings about this for quite some time, coming from American reporting, that they're like, hey, are you guys going to do anything about this? And they get crickets. Nothing gets done. The problem gets worse. Population's fast asleep. Can't get rid of this corrupt government. They're proroguing parliament. They're delaying elections. They're playing a big game here. What are you going to do? Now, what about this shit? Like, where do all these puzzle pieces start coming together? You go, wow, what's up with this? What about, you remember this? All this discussion about the labs, Winnipeg labs, and all this biolab stuff about Canada and some of these pharmaceutical contracts. Let's hope RFK can get into expose the medical mafia going on, right? But here we go. 7 scientists at top virus lab in Canada collaborated with China. Do you think this is science fiction now? This is back from 2021. At least 7 scientists working at a federal microbiology lab studying highly infectious diseases have collaborated on research into deadly pathogens with the Chinese military, a Globe and Mail investigation reveals. The collaborators participated in 6 different studies alongside the People's Liberation, PLA, Academy of Military Medical Sciences, which were published between 2016 and 2020. All 7 of the scientists were working on deadly pathogens in the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg. Among the diseases studied by the group include Ebola, Rift Valley fever, and Lassa fever. One of those researchers, Fei Hu Yan, was mentioned as a co-author to all 6 of the studies, including 2 studies that he was listed as having affiliations with the PLA Academy. 2 other scientists, Zhang Guoku and Kending Cheng, were dismissed from the laboratory in January on the recommendation of the Canadian Security Intelligence Services, which viewed the 2's involvement at the federal lab as a national security issue. And it just goes on. There's a report from the True North, but they're actually covering a Globe and Mail investigation there. So are we going to find out about all that? We were going to find out about that to see how it just unravels. There's more and more. It's like a snowball turning into a freaking building by the time it hits the ground, right? Now we got to talk about University of Alberta doing a study about China's economic impact on Canada, right? Canada and China have a strong history of economic connection, and through its rise to prominence over recent decades, China has become Canada's second most important national economic partner after the United States. This is why I'm telling you guys, you're either going to be practicing Chinese or you're going to be practicing the Star-Spangled Banner. That's our choice at the moment. Given the many countries reevaluating their relationships with China, weighing the benefits of engagement and the costs of diversifying or decoupling, this report aims to provide a comprehensive account of China's role in the Canadian economy. The relationship between Canada and China is complex and nuanced. Some elements are easily qualifiable, while others must be explained qualitatively. And they're just going through the whole thing. Authored by the Chinese Institute at University of Alberta and commissioned by the Canada-China Business Council, the report, which focuses primarily on China-Canada trade, immigration, and investment, concludes that China has a significant impact on Canadian GDP, employment, and overall economic activity. In 2018, for example, the direct GDP impact of China-related exports, new immigration, and Canada-bound investment totaled $42.6 billion, $6.1 billion, and $9.4 billion, respectively. Given the overlaps in these figures, the cumulative GDP effect of measurable China-related impacts likely exceeded $55 billion. Just giving an idea here of how much we are in bed economically with China. This one is National Post. When was this one done? 2024. This was January 18th, 2024. Canada must stem the flow of fentanyl from China. It's coming from Gary Clement. Will 2024 be the year Canada finally gets serious about the fight against fentanyl? 2 weeks ago, a Winnipeg toddler overdosed and nearly died after ingesting the drug at a family gathering. Fentanyl is a fast-acting opioid that's estimated to be up to 100 times more potent than morphine. Police have charged a 28-year-old man with criminal negligence causing bodily harm, but there are culprits that remain at large thousands of miles away. They are fentanyl kingpins in China, source of a scourge that has killed thousands of Canadians in the past 3 years. For the past 40 years, China's government leaders have partnered with organized crime groups known as the Triads, enabling not only the free flow of drugs into North America, but human trafficking and smuggling of pirated goods as well. My God, conspiracy theory coming from the mainstream media, guys. What's going on? Maybe it isn't a theory after all. Under the guise of investment, China's powerful United Front Work Department, remember what Sam Cooper was talking about, has facilitated these activities to further the drug trade and intimidate the Chinese diaspora to bring its influence to bear across the continent. Oh, by the way, a quick question for all the people calling everybody traitors. The Chinese diaspora, do you know what the diaspora means? They were fleeing from oppression in China. Okay, so they fled China to come here because they couldn't, the level got so bad. Are they traitors? Well, the Chinese Communist Party would say they're traitors. But being that they're friendly to the Western values instead, what's going on there? They know that their country was turned into a communist shithole and they wanted to leave it. And because they're loyal to their family and to their own survival. And then they came to a country that they thought adopted the values that they admired based on freedom and all these things. And lo and behold, they find out, and this is me telling you what I've been told by people who have fled China directly to my face. They find out, oh my God, the Communist Chinese Party has just basically taken Canada as a vassal state. They run this shit through the drug underground world. So we fled in order to face the same enemy here. It's coming from them. It's not coming from me. And it's funny that we're even getting some mainstream media talking about it. What else this article got to say? Today, the Chinese Communist Party is waging a reverse opium war, not in the open, but under the table. Its effects are mostly keenly felt on our healthcare system. According to the federal government's health database, a total of 3,970 apparent opioid toxicity deaths occurred in Canada between January and June of 2023. Just a few months. An average of 22 deaths per day. Where's your bleeding heart now? The number was up 5% compared with the same period in 2022. 84% involved fentanyl. To underscore the impact on our health system during the same period, there was a total of 3,036 opioid-related poisoning hospitalizations in Canada, excluding Quebec. This was an average of 17 hospitalizations per day. The median length of stay was 3 days. Resources diverted to treating opioid overdose patients mean longer wait times and fewer resources for others. To highlight the seriousness of the impact of transnational organized crime in our country, it is essential to understand that Mexico's Sinaloa cartel and the Chinese triad syndicate Big Circle Boys have expanded their fentanyl supply in Canada, which has resulted in an abundance of cocaine, fentanyl, and other opioids, not to mention other syncretic and pharmaceutical drugs. And just to point out, if you remember what Sam Cooper was highlighting there, that guess where they make all of these fentanyl, the parts of that make up the drug, what do they call them? The fentanyl, I don't know, whatever it is, the ingredients. Wuhan, China. Wuhan, China. So it makes you wonder, what's the real pandemic coming from China? Was it the flu that maybe escaped the lab, or who the hell knows what that was? Was that part of this attack? Was that an accident? Was there something more to that story we don't know yet? Or are we talking about this, the real pandemic of international concern? What is even more disconcerting is that police uncovered a major fentanyl lab outside of Vancouver in April 2023, which now places Canada as a supplier to the US and Australia. You wonder why Trump's got a problem with what's going on. In 1992, when I was an RCMP liaison officer, this is the author speaking, I predicted that Vancouver would displace Hong Kong as a transshipment destination for drugs into North America due to our lax immigration. Yet every time Canadians talk about the opioid crisis, they focus on treating the effect of the problem, not the cause. You see that? We got to get to the cause of the problems, guys. That's how you fix problems. Instead of debating the merits of safe supply, we should demand a crackdown on the flow of opioids and their compounds into our country. Canadian governments need to recognize that China's collusion with transnational organized crime makes many of its state actors criminals as well. They must stop blindly courting investments from China and undertake an immediate analysis of the damage Chinese criminal activity has caused. The federal government could start by treating a transnational organized crime czar to undertake such a review and report Parliament every quarter, which is what Trump asked Trudeau to do and which Trudeau said he was going to do, but hasn't done yet. It's almost like our Canadian elites here want the tariffs to hit and don't want to fix the problem. Who's the traitor? So the article continues. And then now we're hitting the 2-hour mark. Let me go and check you guys. Holy, we're popping on Rumble. How's it going, everybody? Wow, crazy chat. Good to see everybody here. Yeah, Sue 17. China is calling the shots. It's called Chinata for a legit reason. Exactly. And then who developed China into what it is, the CCP party? Who funded a communist regime? Because we know communist regimes can't fund themselves. They rely on capitalism to fund their enterprise. And you know what I mean? So who built that party and gave it so much power? How did that happen? I wonder. That's another podcast. But here we sit. Now, let's get in. I'm going to go through a couple of the things I've been sharing on X. You got to follow me on X at Truth Warrior Dad. Been doing a lot of coverage on this. Where shall we begin? Where shall we begin? There is a crazy debate raging right now. Yeah, let me just go down here and we get the right stuff here. Yeah, let's just start here. Okay. Sorry, bear with me a second. We'll get this up and running. Okay. Let's open up from this quote from Nietzsche here. It's so funny. It's talking about toxic empathy, okay, which is one of the ways that is used to weaponize the propaganda in the public mind, is this toxic empathy, okay, or what Gad Saad calls suicidal empathy, I think. So this is from Nietzsche, from Beyond Good and Evil. There is a point in the history of society when it becomes so pathologically soft and tender that, among other things, it sides even with those who harm it, criminals, and it does this quite seriously and honestly. Punishing somehow seems unfair to it, and it is certain that imagining punishment and being supposed to punish hurts it, arouses fear in it. It is not enough to render him undangerous. Why still punish? Punishing itself is terrible. With this question, herd morality, the morality of timidity, draws its ultimate consequence. He's describing where most Canadians sadly have their heads right now. Toxic empathy, to the point where they have no idea how pathologically soft they have become, how tenderized they have become, that they end up siding with the very people destroying their society while shooting arrows at the people trying to save it. You can go read so many great authors that describe this exact same process happening in the brutal totalitarian regimes that rose up during the 20th century and even in our current time. So what a zinger, eh? Now, this is from DC Drano, for what it's worth. He's just clarifying from the American perspective. And this is what's good about some of these social media platforms. You can get everybody's opinion and you make up your own mind. But he's saying, I know this tariff battle has got Canadians seemingly pitted against Americans, but I want to make something clear for the record. Our beef is not with the Canadian people. It is with the liberal Canadian government terrorizing the Canadian people. Tens of millions of Americans appreciate the Canadian truckers for what they did to destroy COVID protocols worldwide. We are now fighting your hostile government to help liberate you. And many of my friends from America are telling you that's how they feel. Whether you think that's what's happening, it doesn't matter. That's how they feel. That's how they feel. Some Canadians understand this. Most of them don't. This is just more of the incredibly embarrassing moments. Yeah, you're being played. Check out all these people. They're all WEF. All of them. There's your illusion of choice. Let's vote our way out, guys. Sounds great. Now, I know there's lesser of two evils and all that, but like, again, I'm just here to show you the big picture. And I quoted Klaus Schwab when he was like, we penetrate the cabinets and we're super proud of it. This one here, Leonard, he's just saying, there's lots of these Canadians online, guys. My name is Leonard. I'm Canadian. I want my American friends to know I do not support the booing, the division, or the boycotting. It's disrespectful, rude, embarrassing, disgusting, and immature. Probably lives in Western Canada. I doubt he comes from Ontario. They feel very differently over there. Yeah. Zachary Tisdale, he's got some good stuff. He was just pointing this out. Someone posting, Dear America, we're not booing your hockey players. We're not booing your country. We're not even booing you. We're booing your asshole of a president who keeps threatening our sovereignty for zero reason. Once he leaves us all alone, it'll stop. Hope that clears it up for you. Yeah, he's really doing this for zero reason. You've got your head up your arse, man. Here's some funny shit from Ben Banakas here. I hope that doesn't happen, but it's just some comic relief there, if that's possible. Yeah, here's another one. Yep, we're good. Ivano DeFazio, Italian. I am a Canadian and I do not support Canadians booing the U.S. anthem. This division has caused by our corrupt liberal NDP party on behalf of myself, and on behalf of myself, U.S., we are sorry for the actions of some Canadians. This is from Dr. Virginia J. Johnson, who says, never forget that American patriots stood shoulder to shoulder with Canadian patriots when, quote, Team Uniparty, instead of Team Canada, used the Emergencies Act and tyrannical measures at the Freedom Convoy. They stood with us. We will never forget. Thank you. And I want to echo that. I was involved. I was doing the shows. I was covering it. I got so many absolutely heart-wrenching emails from Americans talking about their support for Canada, wishing us well, hoping us well, worried for us constantly. They still email me. They still message me. They look at us like family already. And they're like, what happened, guys? What's going on? We care about you. That's the sentiment. It's not, we're going to come in and fucking just mow everybody down and take over and steal all your resources. That's just, it's hilarious. Here's a here's a video. I think this guy's in America. He's just kind of bringing up how, unfortunately, Canada is basically just as corrupt as Mexico at this point. Here. Well, there you go. That's the sentiment. Yeah, this is an interesting point from Viva Fry, where he's saying, you cannot help people who do not want to help themselves. The Ottawa trucker protest was fantastic. The problem then was that the majority of Canadians were against the trucker protest. They supported the Emergencies Act invocation. They believed the bullshit Canadian media. And it's very same brainwashed, brain dead idiots who are now adopting the Trudeau-esque arrogant pomposity by booing the American national anthem. Canadians would rather live in the safety of their government-crafted prisons if it meant distinguishing themselves from the big bad orange man America. Booing the American national anthem is the manifestation of brainwashing and the absolute absence of any meaningful critical thought at a national level. What I liked about this was that he was highlighting something that I've been highlighting, which is that the vast majority of Canadians are basically brainwashed to despise freedom and to have this silver spoon up their arse that they're better than everybody else. And meanwhile, there's egg on our face right now as a country because the facts don't bear that out at all. And we're just being called on it. And they are just as much against the people in Canada that have been trying to save it as the enemies of Canada, because the enemies of Canada are providing Canadians with their information. So it's quite a situation. And I'm just not sure how we're going to be able to deal with that problem. You might be able to elect some guy in there that does a brilliant job. You might be able to do some constitutional reform. You might be able to do all these fixes that everybody's arguing about. But how are you going to deal with the mass brainwashing? How are you going to deal with the crowd? That's my question. And I'm still waiting for a good answer on that. Oh, that's where I won't play it, but that's where CBS joined some German police to conduct a raid on a citizen for posting a meme online. This is what it's like living in Germany now. And that's what it's going to be like in Canada. Oh, I just love this. I'm just playing it because it's so badass. I love it. Why do you persist, Mr. Anderson, in resisting us? Because I choose to. That's your meme. That's your mantra. Because I choose to. Okay, so this one is a post from Sarah Swain. She says, I don't know who needs to hear this, but quote, Team Canada is actually a public relations campaign to save a failing level of leftist support and not an act of true patriotism. And I got to hand it to them. It's a power move in terms of rebranding in the public eye because people are buying it and believing it's a genuine show of solidarity and not a manipulative political opportunism. When you combine the right opportunity with the right campaign with a solid dose of camaraderie, you create a movement. And guys, these people are experts at creating movements. When you create a movement, groupthink takes over and people are less likely to express opinions or ask critical questions because it's the crowd consciousness. Polarizing behavior such as, if you're not this, then you're this, takes hold and people begin to self-censor and stay silent. It's quite brilliant on their part. PR is powerful, fascinating, and terrifying. It's a good observation. It's exactly what's going on. Oh, and hey, we're about to go. Apparently, they're going to go and do a live tour of Fort Knox to see if the gold bars are real. Come on, like, is this getting any? Who's mad about that? Like, let's do that. I remember that being a conspiracy theory long ago. Let's see what's under that little story. There's Trudeau just posting about hockey games while the country's sitting in just dumbfounded panic. This is Ryan Garrettson. He's just commenting again on all the booing going on. The ease at which mass formation takes hold of so many Canadians is alarming. It reminds me of the COVID era so much. These are the same people who cheered on unvaccinated people being banned from society and who love to be governed harder. Does this actually make them feel better? If it does, they need to maybe take a long look in the mirror and figure out what type of person they are and what powers they're really serving. And the architect is saying Team Canada is literally Team CCP and they don't even know it. Yeah, this is the full interview with Steve Bannon. And then I just posted the clip that I played for you guys. This is from Government Corrupt. If you're not calling to immediately end all foreign aid, you're not Canada First. If you support handing out taxpayer funds to immigrants, you're not Canada First. If you constantly find yourself aligned with MSM on every current thing, you're not Canada First. You're government first. And there's a big difference. And then John Paul Berg, you should follow him. Semper Veritas X. Go follow him on X. He's a Canadian. Is he in Alberta? I'm not sure. He's been doing some great stuff on this. I've been seeing eye to eye a lot. Excuse me. He did a good post this morning. He said, I've been called a traitor by many. I am no traitor. I see what's happened to my country, and it pains me. I see how utterly obvious many of my fellow countrymen are I see how utterly oblivious many of my fellow countrymen are regarding this, and it pains me. I hear strong, intelligent, conservative Canadians making arguments for the national sovereignty of a country that endeavors to remove their individual sovereignty, and it pains me. Are we really that demoralized and tepid? The true patriot wants what he determines to be the best for the people of his country, not blind allegiance to a profoundly corrupt system, and certainly not some long dead sense of national pride in a country that in many tangible ways does not exist. The peaceful and prosperous country we grew up in is simply not here for our children. If you deny that demonstrably accurate statement, you're in denial. For we have to come to terms regarding what's occurred to our country before we can attempt to remedy the situation. Canada is a people, not this irredeemably corrupt minority government and not the systemically undemocratic constitutional monarchy Westminster parliamentary government that allows for such tyranny to prevail. The true patriot sees what his country could be. He doesn't begrudgingly accept corruption. He strives to eliminate it. I'm just a simple working class man, but in my estimation, that's true patriot love. Hear, hear, John. Well said. What is a country? What is a patriot? Ask for definitions from people that are saying those words. I guarantee they don't know how to answer you. So there you go, guys. Those were the notes I wanted to share with you. We don't know what's going to happen. We're talking weeks, months of who knows, right? And it's been like that for 4 or 5 years now. So I'm kind of used to it. I don't know about you. I'm like desensitized at this point. But where my heart sits, aside from any of this political shit, my politics are freedom and prosperity. My patriotism is to the foundational principles and values upon which our country should be founded. And you could say was once upon a time to a certain degree. What is a country? Yeah, it's a geographical location. Yes, it's a people. Yes, it's whatever. But it's not just the symbols and the rites and rituals and the government and all these things. A country is what a country is because it's based on something that we as humans strive towards. That would be the way a true country, a true free society and a true free country should be based upon. It's based upon principles and values that you want to enshrine into the laws, into the institutions, into the culture. So when those things are gone, yeah, the flag remains. Yeah, the government setup remains. Yeah, the lion and the unicorn symbol of the Crown Corporation remains. Yeah, the look of Canada remains. The maple syrup is still there. The French's ketchup is still there. The Canadian Crown Royal whiskey is still there, whatever it is, right? But what is it really? What are you really patriotic towards? What are you really here for? Why are people coming to Canada only to realize they're going to turn around and get the hell out of here because it's too expensive to live here and you can't afford a house? And they see the corruption here happening in the same way they saw in the country they just fled from. What is Canada? If you abandon the principles and values, but you leave all the decorations up, you can get people to believe that they're in a country called Canada that's based on whatever, right? But the truth of it is that it's the principles and values, the ideas. There once was an idea, that a dream that was Rome, a dream that was a free society, a dream that was America, a dream that was Canada. There was a dream. The dream was based on ideas. The dream was based on solving problems. The dream was based on establishing a rule of law, but establishing a system of freedom and prosperity for the people. And there was ideas and principles and values at the base of that end up producing that effect. When you remove the principles and values upon which those things are based, you're only left with a straw man. You're only left with a fake scam that pretends to be something that it isn't. And that straw man is where they're directing your allegiance right now, not the real thing that you think they're directing you to. Those principles and values have vanished a long time ago from the system, but not from your potential to embody those principles and values as a sovereign being. They can't take that from you. But they can swindle you to get your allegiance. This is how swindlers and criminals work. They give you the fake version of what they think you want. You bite it because you think you want something wholesome and good. And it's only later you realize you've been poisoned. You've been chiseled. You've been robbed. You've been kicked around and abused. And then you adopt an abused victim mentality and you keep going back to your enslavers for more because you don't have a direction other than I need big mommy daddy to tell me how to live my life and what my values are and what my country is. And if they say get up and fight for it, even if they are not representing what it is, I'll do it because I don't have any other direction in life otherwise. So winning people's allegiance is simple. Simple. Hollywood perfected it. Madison Avenue perfected it. The people who pull the strings of the public mind, like Bernays quoted, perfected it. Your government officials perfected it. Foreign adversaries have perfected it. The Trojan horse system, the Trojan horse strategy of how to infiltrate a society without them even knowing it has been perfected for thousands of years. Do you think it went away because World War II is over? Come on. So what am I patriotic to? I'm patriotic to the people that are on the same page that understand what I'm telling you. It's the foundational values that make up what a country is. And when you lose those, you lose your country. And we've lost our country, but we haven't lost the principles and values. And we're in a battle, and we're going to have to make some very unorthodox decisions in order to survive, let alone get to a place where we can actually reinstall the true principles of freedom again. And we may need some help, and we may need to have some strategic alliances as the Game of Thrones scenario happens in real time for all of us, with that common enemy coming at the gates while we're all tearing each other to bits over minutia that is being directed by expert manipulators and propagandists that know how to weaponize the public mind. That's a science that's known. And they get you to follow little carrots on sticks, and they wave shiny objects in your face, and they manipulate your emotions so that you don't think logically. So Canada, let's start acting like real patriots and start thinking logically and start addressing the problems and start looking past that first few. You just got to look past the first few layers of these lies to see the real matrix, to go like, whoa, I see the matrix for what it is now. Doesn't take much, just a little push through the veil, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And that evil can be defeated. It can be routed out. If it can grow itself up and implant itself, it can be, your immune system can be raised and it can be vanquished. But not until the immune system of your consciousness is raised and you understand what it is that you think you're hanging on to here. It's not a flag. It's not symbols. It's not a bunch of Mounties. It's not maple syrup. It's not hockey games. It's values. It's people. It's our land. It's everything we as a people have achieved and can achieve yet. We're already a state. We're not a sovereign nation. That's just the paper. That's the what they say on the title. And the fact that our politicians are not being honest about that tells me who they work for. But that doesn't mean the idea you have in your mind about what Canada is and what you think it is and what you think that doesn't mean that idea needs to go away. It's just that the way we're going to set up our shop is going to have to be a lot different if we're going to actually successfully defend against the very particular, the very cunning adversaries that we're up against right now. And we need to join forces with people that also are patriotic to those foundational values that actually birthed not just America, but Western civilization in general and the principles of freedom, rather than the principles of serfdom, which is what that great reset cabal wants to reinstall again. The medieval serfdom model of monarchy, holier than thou, we're the elites, we rule you. It's a technocracy, it's a kleptocracy, it's a criminal cartel that doesn't give a shit. These people are extinctionists in their minds. There's too many human beings running around. They do not have any loyalty to your country, and the people they're putting up to play pretend also don't have loyalty to your country. So if those people are telling you to be patriotic, what do you think they're asking you to be patriotic for? They want you to be patriotic to become a state in the European Union, which is what they're talking about right now, in the globalist UN world government system agenda, the Great Reset. That's where they want your loyalty. China has its own interests. They're just the tip of the spear for the bigger cats at the high table. They probably don't even know that. So it's gang warfare. We have a common enemy, which means we got to unite the clans against that common enemy, no matter what demographic, what physical, geographical location you come from. Are you on team freedom and prosperity and team humanity? Or are you in team extinctionist protocol, tyranny, digital surveillance state, government bureaucracy, run by people who run drugs, children, terrorist networks, and weapons all the way through your institutions to a level that you can't even imagine? That's not what I'm patriotic to. So hopefully that gave you something to think about. That's just the toe in the door, my friends. We're going to get a hell of a lot more in the coming weeks and months. You watch. That's my prediction. And my other prediction stands as it stand from the beginning of this show. Our opinions be damned. It's the truth that's going to win in the end. So there you have it, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to do some more live streams. If this resonated with you, please help me share it out. Give me some likes. Give me some comments. Let's keep this discussion going. We don't all have to agree, but we do have to have this discussion. So let's have it and let's find some solutions. My heart is with you. I'm on Team Freedom, and let's bring it home. Thanks, everyone.